Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the regular meeting be suspended and the committee of the whole meeting be convened. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Motion's carried. I'd like to call tonight's committee of the whole meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting of August 21st, 2017 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Randhawa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, this portion of our meeting is a more informal setting. Anyone that has any questions for council can come to the mic and speak on any topic of your choice. No resolutions or terminations will be made tonight, but we're here to hear your concerns about the community, and if there's anybody who wants to come forward, you can do so now. Welcome.
A couple of questions. Oh, Larry Golden, Prince Rupert, 1601 2nd Avenue. We potentially have, there's a problem, a question of invasive species that came up on a CBC talk show, The Almanac at noon, and Prince Rupert came up twice. And so I was going to send this to, and I will, but I think we have potentially Japanese knotweed, and it's down there by the new dock on the Cal Bay. It's on port land there. They cut it once, and I looked at it, it's grown back up again. So we might want to, since we do presumably still have a biologist, it might be one of the things to, since LNG is probably not going to be on the top of their, we might have them look at that one. And the other one's cow parsnip or giant hogweed or something like that. And there, it's all over the place, but we don't know if it's the one that's on the endangered species list or not. So several municipalities have action plans that the municipality does. So if this is cow parsnip, and I think I looked, and I think there might be some place in Alaska that has it too. It's all over the place, whereas where the knotweed is fairly localized and maybe it can be exterminated. Along the same lines is remembering 10-10-10, and that was when we had the really bad storm that came through. It might not have exactly been 10-10-10, but it was
10-10-10.
Easy to remember that. Yeah. It might have been the 9th. But so along the same lines, I would ask the city, and we should do it every year, to go around and look where there are tall trees that are sort of just out there by themselves, that if they get knocked over, they're going to take out the power. And so it's tall trees, and they're usually not on city land, but they could be. So it's just, and we used to do that kind of thing. We'd go around and say this tree is potentially dangerous, and you don't care so much on their land, but it's where power cables and things are going to be taken out. There's a potential of being taken out. I also wanted to ask about, the mayor's full-time, etc., we were making ourselves LNG ready. And so that doesn't look like LNG. I would think we should be having a community discussion about what we want to do in the future. And I think we don't want a full-time, four-time mayor, etc. But we should be getting it out there as part of the community discussion. And the third sort of thing I'd like to see is the city has been putting off smaller companies like Legacy and like City West. And City West isn't a smaller company, but I would like us to have both their audit and their statement of financial information for all the ones where the city owns, where they're considered city companies, up here at the desk upstairs. So the LNG one, or the Legacy one, we got the audit. We potentially, I didn't remember seeing the statement of financial information, how many were paying. So there should be, even there should be an AGM where those things are done each year, and so we might even have the notes to the AGM. So, and the third thing was, it reminded me of the RCMP sitting back here. I've done the research, etc. We may have the staff for a city of 15,000, where ours is a population is 11,000 now. So it's a fairly rigorous and time-consuming chore to say, no, we don't need X number, we need more, we need 2 or 3 or 4 less. And I'd like to hear that discussion go on at least, because like I said, I suspect it's a 2-year ordeal to even implement it. But we should have the discussion anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
You understood what I mean about the number of RCMP and stuff like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to come forward and speak to council?
Lest people think that we have a lot of giant hogweed around, I think we have to know most of that is cow parsnip, and cow parsnip also has people can have a reaction to the sap from the cow parsnip and end up with it's photosensitive, so it can burn your skin, which is the same thing as what giant hogweed does. Only cow parsnip doesn't do it to the same extent as giant hogweed. So I don't think anybody's identified giant hogweed being in Prince Rupert. That's a real dangerous plant. It's far more toxic than cow parsnip, and I think that people don't need to be panicking over the cow parsnip, which has always been here, which First Nations people have actually used as a vegetable in their own diets and their traditional diet. And I think that we don't need to start a real concern that every cow parsnip is because they're just all over the place, is a giant knotweed. They're not. They're two different things. One's an invasive species and one's a indigenous species. So.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else from... Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to reconvene the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favour? Motion's carried. Okay, recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of August 21st, 2017 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of July 24th, 2017 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 24th, 2017 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3C, recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of July 24th, 2017 be received. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3D, recommendation that the minutes of the special regular council meeting of August 2nd, 2017 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And item 3E, recommendation of the minutes of the special regular council meeting of August 4th, 2017 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, first up we have a petition of delegation by Inspector Blake Ward, the detachment commander of the RCMP, regarding the interim 2017 policing report. Welcome.
Thank you. Brought with me Staff Sergeant Brian Donaldson as our operations NCO. If there's any questions regarding operations, he's going to answer those specifically.
Great. Hit your green button there. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us here. First off, this just concludes my first full year in Prince Rupert, or back in Prince Rupert. Overall, I think it's been going quite well. We've tackled a number of issues inside the detachment. One of the key things that we have to be aware of as a police department is that things are constantly changing. The case law comes out. We have policy changes as a result of case law. We have more and more public input on different areas that we do policing. And then technology also has a great factor in how we do business. So we have to have our minds open to the fact that we have to be adaptable. And that in itself can be challenging for some long-term employees. So overall, though, it's been a great year. We've made some great strides inside the detachment in regards to how we do business and moving things forward, modernizing it, more than the best way to say it. One of the areas that we've had to struggle with this last year is the number of transfers in and out. Being that Prince Rupert's a 4-year limited duration posting, we have had a significant number, over half of our membership changed last year. So that's very challenging when you're trying to juggle those resources in and out. And unfortunately, a lot of them had to be replaced by cadets coming out of training. So there's more time involved in training them up, getting them on the road. And the benefit is we get to create the Mountie we want. So it's good from our perspective in that way. But it does a little more taxing on the membership to get them up to speed. Going forward, we're going to be focusing on trying to evening out that rotationary cycle, trying to encourage some extensions where possible to make it so that we can get that on a more even keel. This next year is looking pretty good as far as transfers. It's pretty manageable. And talk about training, one of the areas that we, being a junior detachment, we have to focus a lot of our time on training. And we have to make that up with the lack of experience we have. So we do focus a lot on the various aspects of training, from operational type training to such as handling human sources, search warrant, operational skills training such as our combined energy weapons or carbine training, through to other administrative courses like our PRIME, which is our database for records management. So we have a number of training that has to be done, and we have to do our annual qualifications in a number of areas. So all this takes time. And so we spend, this last quarter was over 1,000 hours of just doing training within the membership. So it takes, again, a considerable amount of effort. In April of 2017, we started our new annual performance plan. And in that plan, we've identified a number of priorities that we want to focus on this next year. And so the first one is impaired operations, basically focusing on road safety. So we wanted to make sure that we increased those, kept going with those check stops. We saw some great successes last year in regards to dealing with impaired drivers. So we want to keep that going this year. We also want to maintain our number of traffic contacts, whether it be warnings, written warnings, or tickets. The goal is to try to change behavior when it comes to driving habits. And also wanted to focus on targeted enforcement activities, whether it be with CVSE inspectors, DFO, maybe plainclothes units, so that we can do more targeted enforcement with, like we did with the cell phone usage when they're driving. Those kind of activities. So we want to focus on trying to do those on a regular basis. And we had a good start for the first quarter for this reporting period. We were well on track to meet our goals, so that's good to see. The members are really putting the effort forward in that area. The other area that is of concern for us is domestic violence. It's a real problem here in Prince Rupert for a number of reasons, and it's something that we want to try to take some steps to address. It's not an easy offense to deal with, because we can't just walk down the street and say, oh yeah, that house is going to have a domestic violence situation tonight, so we can go and prevent it. So it's a real challenge, and so we are trying a number of different ways to deal with it. The best way to deal with it, from what we can see, is dealing with the support groups and support for the victims that have been involved with domestic violence, but also for the making sure that our investigations are rock solid, and trying to take away from that conflict that comes up when a victim doesn't want to go to court anymore, and yet we have evidence to proceed, and it might be in the best interest of the victim to proceed anyways. And so we have those challenges, but those are areas that we're trying to address. And fortunately enough, we've had one member that's been in light duties for the last 3 months, and she's trained in what we call Be Safer. So she's been analyzing these domestic violence files and helping us identify where areas where we can try to target them a little more specifically, especially if they're a high-risk family. And there is a number of them in town. So we continue to work forward on that. And as you know, we had the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event that was trying to bring awareness to domestic violence. The next area of priority for us is crime reduction. It's trying to reduce the number of property crimes and the crimes against persons. This focus of this is really trying to be highly visible. Our thoughts about it is that if people see us out there, less likely going to try something. And so that's a big focus that we've been trying to do, is being highly visible, and sometimes at the cost of other things that go on in the office. So the members get out there and they're doing a lot of patrols, trying to increase our foot patrols. Had a couple bike patrols already this year. Just trying to be highly visible. With that crime reduction strategy, we've also implemented a prolific offender program, which we've seen some successes with. In particular, an example of it is our theft from motor vehicles. In 2016, we had 41 offenses of theft from motor vehicles, and up to this date. And this year, in 2017, we've only had 12. And to me, that's an example of one of our prolific offenders who's we know was responsible for those. We've kept him kept a lot of pressure on him to make sure that he's abiding by the law, and we've also had to deal with him a couple of times and incarcerate him and back in Prince George. So there is an effect of the prolific offender program that is able to help reduce the crime. It takes a lot of work to do that, a lot of curfew checks, making sure that those individuals are abiding by their curfews, which is what we get all our memberships to do as well. And our last priority for this year is contributing to a safer and healthier Aboriginal communities. One of the challenges we have is we have a number of members that come in, they're only here for a short period of time, and they don't build the relationships in the community. And we'd like to try to improve upon that. So one of our initiatives in this area is trying to just attend things like the Friendship House. The pressure is on all our members to go down there, make presence. Just walk in, say hi, talk to people, and try to break down some of those barriers and get it so that they have a little more trust and faith within the police. I won't get into too much stats, and just because it's just numbers on some fronts, but there's some key things to make note of. When you look at the report, the mayor's report for this year, you'll notice that there's a significant drop in the actual calls for service. Now, calls for service is what we document as any time we get someone calling the police or anything proactive that we do. It's called a call for service, and a file is generated. It does not mean a crime has actually occurred, but it does get put into a category based upon what the call was brought to us with. So we've dropped a significant number in the last year regarding our calls for service, and the biggest reason why is our police information checks. We used to generate a file for those every time we had to do one. Now we do them in a bulk administrative file, so they don't come out of our operational files anymore. We're still doing the work, it just changes how it's scored. So you're going to see a significant drop. It's over 400 files at this time this year. That is a big change there. The other area the more important area that we want to address is, in regards to statistics, is our actual offenses, the stuff that gets reported to Stats Canada. These are the actual, when we conduct an investigation, and we determine that this event, this occurrence did in fact occur, and as a result it gets reported as a crime. Now those are the ones that cause us the biggest grief. There are some significant changes in some areas, but when you look at the report, be mindful that you don't look at the percentages, look at the numbers as well. For example, auto theft, we saw a decrease of 66%. That sounds great, but we only had 6 last year, 2 this year. So that is a big reduction, but when you look at the big picture, it's not that big. It's not a huge difference. I already mentioned about the theft from vehicle. We have had an increase in break and enters to the businesses. That's over doubled. We had 5 at this time last year. We're up to 11. So that's definitely of a concern to us. We have a few files that are still open and with some targets on that, but really we're struggling with those ones. We don't have a lot of information on those. The prisoner count is another area that I wanted to highlight for you. Our focus has been knowing that we have concerns with our cells. We've been trying to take other steps to reduce our prisoners as much as possible. If we can take someone who's intoxicated home, it's got someone sober that can take care of them, we'll do that. If not, we have to incarcerate them for at least until they're sobered up. We've also been working with Terrace to ensure that our high-risk prisoners are taken to Terrace as much as possible, and they've been fortunate enough to help us out with that. So our total prisoner count at this point is down to 572 as compared to 667 to this time last year. So it's helping, reducing those issues. But we continue to have those issues in cells and causing us concern with the safety in there. The other thing that I just kind of want to touch on was what Mr. Goldberg was talking about there regarding the number of police officers. And in December of this 2016, we started using a program. It's a program that's used in the cars already. It's using our computers that are in the cars to track more accurately what the members are doing. Because traditionally what would happen is you get dispatched to a call, the members would attend the call, another call would come in, they wouldn't finish writing up that call, they would just make notes and go to the next call, and go to the next call, and go to the next call. And then about 3 in the morning they go back to the detachment and write up all these files. The problem is you don't capture the actual value of the amount of effort involved in one file. Okay? So this program, it's called GDSAC, and it's a program that tracks what the members are doing as far as their codes that they enter in. Now, we've been advised that it'll take up to a year before we get accurate numbers out of that, because it's a thing the members have to learn to do, is to punch the computer when they're done certain things, to go and do the report writing before they leave the scene, those kind of things. But already we're seeing some significant numbers that are coming out of that can help with this discussion down the road when we talk about the number of police officers. Because it does break it down into the number of amount of time involved with attending to a call on scene, amount of time report writing for a call, amount of time doing proactive policing. So it breaks it all down and to certain categories and certain percentages. So you as a council can then determine what value you want to see as far as do you want to see 25% of the work that we do being proactive policing, or do you want 45%? So that will give you that information as we move that forward. So I expect closer to Christmas we should have more realistic numbers from that. We do get out of it already though is the calls are broken down on how they come in as being a priority call, 1 to 4. So priority 1s are emergency, priority 2s are urgent, priority 3s are routine, and priority 4s in large centers, they don't attend. We attend everything here. There's nothing we don't attend. So as a result, just to give you an idea, for the month of July, there was 718 calls we attended. Of those, 56 were a priority 1, 193 were a priority 2, 362 were a priority 3, and 106 were priority 4. So we have benchmarks that we're supposed to meet in regards to response time. And response time for priority 1 is basically as soon as you can. Priority 2 is up to 7 minutes. Priority 3 is up to 10 minutes. And like I said, in big centers, priority 4, they don't even attend. We are beating those benchmarks, even across the board. I don't have accurate numbers for you right now, but the last time we checked, we are beating those benchmarks. But the question then starts coming down the road is those priority 4s. What does council want us to do with some of those priority 4s? Because it does take time. It can take a considerable amount of time going to some of these calls. And so those are questions that we can be looking at down the road as we get more of this information that we can present to council.
I was wondering if we could get an example of the priority.
Sure can. So liquor licenses. When we get our social special occasions liquor license. Our standard practice is to, first of all, they only come to us if there's over 100 people in attendance. And if there's anything less than 100, we don't have anything to do with them. So there's over 100 people in attendance. We will look at it to make sure that it's going to be a safe venue, safe event, make sure that all the safety things are set up. And then we'll crack a file, and the members working that night will make an appearance to assure that that liquor license is being responded to appropriately by the people that are doing it. Sometimes that attendance is just outside, checking with security outside, or it may be coming inside. It's a proactive thing. We're trying to address the alcohol issues in the community, knowing full well that alcohol and substance abuse issues are one of our major problems here, and that we're trying to address. But it's a real social issue. So we want to be proactive on that. So that's an example of a priority 4. Another one would be so you got mischief. So when you have some vandalism to some things, for example, vandalism to a bus stop in the city, that wouldn't be attended to. There's no real evidence to be gathered from it in their mind, so they wouldn't even attend to it, whereas we would. Okay, so those are the kind of the ideas that those things that there's no real evidence to be gathered, then there's no need for us to be attending. That's the big city mentality. That's not our mentality. We go to it all, but it does affect our ability to do other things when we're involved with every call. So.
Questions from council? Councillor Nish.
One concern when you speak about. Can you turn yours off there? When you speak about like hours of training, so when I think about that, I think as a city, are we paying for 1,000 hours for training of police officers, or is there any funds that come from the RCMP directly to pay for this? Because I look at that as that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that is going from our pockets as the city to training officers who and you say like last year you had a huge turnover. To me, that's taking officers off of the street or away from doing things that would be more what we would be thinking we're paying for, not here to be a training center for the RCMP. So I just would like to know, is there funds coming from the RCMP for that, or is that just strictly what we're paying?
So first off, the 1,000 hours is a entire detachment. So that's municipal side of it, as well as our coastal policing side. But it's also our office staff. For example, guard refresher training has to happen every 6 months. That's a mandatory thing that has to happen. The payment side of it, we hired someone to come in once to train our guards, so that our senior guards can do the training ongoing. So aside from the time spent doing the training, there's no other cost outlay. A lot of the training that is done in that way. We try to find trainers that will come in, train here, and deal with it, so it saves travel costs. There is a sizable amount of some of the training that is done at PRTC in Chilliwack that is covered by the province. Doesn't matter what unit we come from. For example, our operational skills training, it's a week-long course where we do a lot of research that have to be done every 3 years. That's 100% paid for by the province. Okay? So aside from the time away was where the big factor comes in. Majority of the training is paid for by the province themselves. Other areas that we have to deal with is, for example, our annual firearms qualification. We have to do that. And we're mandated as things like from the Moncton shooting that happened there. And there's been a number of changes on the front when it comes to firearms that we have to have familiarization and training with them on an ongoing basis, as well as practice shoots. So that takes time. And again, it's when they're working. So we are caught between a rock and a hard spot in some of these areas. But as far as the actual finances side of it goes, it's a mixture. Majority of the time, it's the salary dollars for the city members are being covered by the city, but the majority of the training is covered by elsewhere. We do have some training that we have to pay for, but it's nowhere near as much. Sorry, I can't give you an exact figure right now.
No, that's good. I mean, I expect there's going to be training issues, all the time. But the way we're making it sound as, basically we're turning into this training center for all the new recruits that are coming in because there's so many of them coming. It's a bit of concern, when you see the money that we're spending, because obviously we know that it's a costly endeavor to have RCMP. So, but obviously an important one. So I just was curious as to how much we have to contribute for that.
Councillor Manhala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. And I can say we can see your presence on the roads and the difference you made to the community, especially 1 year or especially last 6 months. And I'd like to thank for your great work. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks for coming. I've been asking for you guys to come for a while. But couple of questions. Up and down numbers. Where are we with full numbers for the detachment for members? Are we up or down? Are we full complement or?
Well, we're 36 is our detachment strength. We're only going for 29 because we have frozen vacancies for right now. Even at the 29, it's a challenge to keep them there. Right now, we're sitting at about 26 because we have a couple members that are pregnant. That until they get to a certain point, they're still on our books, but then they switch over to a different collator that opens it up so that we can do something different. So it's just the timing that goes with that to plan for that. But we did address a couple of our shortages that we had long term regarding a member that was suspended. That's been dealt with. And we've got some of the other long-term ODS members back to work. So we only have one member that's long-term ODS right now. Off-duty 6, sorry. Shouldn't use that acronyms. But overall, we're sitting probably about 26 right now.
And it must be challenging to make. It must be challenging to make it work with those low numbers, with the population and that, and a lot of the transients we've had in the past little while. The other question I'd like to ask is, I've heard nothing but good things about the community policing and the force being out there and being seen, and that, which was something we didn't see years ago. And that you see the cars out and you actually see officers walking once in a while. But have we had any other complaints coming from the other side? I haven't heard of any, but are there any official complaints against the members themselves?
I'm not aware of any actual complaints. We actually get a lot of feedback from the public about them liking the members out there doing the road checks, like them doing the foot patrols and such. Just in note in regards to the numbers, it definitely is a challenge. If you go back even 10 years ago, what we were allowed to do compared to what we do now as far as our numbers have changed. We have backup policy, and you have to have a certain amount of support for your members at all times now. So those are things that have changed in the last 10 or 12 years that affect us with that. So that's a component that we have to address more as we continue to move forward. The other things that come into play are like the extension now with maternity and paternity leave being extended as long as it is. Those are positions that are vacant or that are filled. We're not supposed to fill them, but we have to leave that vacancy for now 18 months. So that's a challenge.
Like I say, I've heard nothing but positive comments about the force in the last year or two, and the morale in that too. So it's a good sign. I'm glad.
Councillor Thorkelson.
If you had if you were going to be allowed one magic wish for a social service in town that would resolve a lot of problems that the RCMP are facing, and I'm thinking of things like alcohol drug detox center or more emergency housing or along that kind of line. That's not within your control, but you've got a magic wand and you're going to tap something and it's going to appear tomorrow. What would you think that the most important social service that we could have in our community to reduce the types of problems that you guys are faced with?
That's a tough question, mostly because so many of those areas are intercombined and they're linked together. The substance abuse, alcohol, and drugs is definitely a huge area, but so is the mental health side of it. And we often see, and I mean, we have a sizable number of our files that are related to drug and alcohol and mental health, and you see they're connected. There's someone that's taking drugs, is having schizophrenic episodes or thoughts of suicide. And so I don't think there's one thing that you could say that we need one event or one support group that could help them. It's got to be more of a holistic approach in my mind. We work very closely with the doctors here in town, and we have good working relationship with them, and I got to say one of the best in the communities I've worked in. So it makes our job a lot easier. But having said that, it's almost every shift we're dealing with somebody with mental health issues, and there's no question that the drug and alcohol issues are multiple people every shift that we're dealing with. So, sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I can't say that there'd be one thing. It's looking at it from a more of a group perspective.
Other questions from council? Okay, well, thank you very much for your guys' time today. Really appreciate it, and definitely appreciate everything you're doing for the community. It's definitely noticeable, so thank you.
Thank you.
And the shoes, high heels, he matched his uniform. They were red.
Yes, there's photos. Don't leave too quickly now. Just joking, you can leave. Okay, moving on to reports and recommendations. Report 6A from the community planner regarding the application for development variance permit for 1501 Sloan Avenue.
Thank you. Very different topic. This development variance permit request at 1501 Sloan Avenue is for an accessory building at the rear of the property for the purpose of a hobby workshop. The full application is included in the report. The application is to vary section 5.1.3b of the Prince Rupert zoning bylaw to increase the maximum allowable height for an accessory building from 3.6 meters to 4.5 meters. The proposal will be located at the rear southeast corner of this property, abutting and accessible from a laneway. The laneway is developed and maintained by the city. The neighboring property to the south is not deemed adversely affected by the scale or rear yard location, and due to the corner lot aspect, the properties to the west, north, and east are not significantly affected. And I beg your pardon, I was showing the wrong one. There we go.
I was just thinking that.
What? Okay.
That's all.
What a relief. Okay, there's the aspect, location, and laneway. Thank you. Staff issued notification of the proposed variance to the neighboring properties within a radius of 50 meters. At the end of the notification period, staff received inquiries. Oh, yes, that's right. Now I'm getting confused. From 2 property owners for further information. These properties were unaffected by the proposal. In conclusion, as of today's date, we did not receive any objections that would prevent approval for this application for variance. Do you have any questions?
Questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Recommendation that the development variance permit application number DP 1706 for 1501 Sloan Avenue proceed to final consideration. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Manhala. Further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, and moving on to probably the one you were showing us originally, 1408 7th Avenue East.
Thank you for your patience. This development variance permit request at 1408 7th Avenue East is for a single-story accessory building at the rear of the property for recreation vehicle storage. The full application is included in the report. The application is to vary section 5.2.3b of the Prince Rupert zoning bylaw to increase the maximum allowable height for an accessory building from 3.6 meters to 6.7 meters. The proposal will be located at the rear south corner of this property, abutting and accessible from a laneway. The laneway is undeveloped and is not maintained by the city. the applicant has been made aware that services such as snow removal, grading, repairs, and/or drainage improvements are not provided, nor is access guaranteed. A letter of acknowledgement from the applicant is included in the report. Adjacent to the property, subject property is a 2-story residence to the southwest, a vacant lot to the northeast, and abutting the laneway are primarily single-story residences. The impact on the neighboring residences, as well as on the form and character of this neighborhood, is not significantly affected by the scale or location of this proposal. Moreover, the applicant has satisfied city engineering stormwater management requirements. In conclusion, the applicant requests approval to proceed to public notification. Do you have any questions?
Questions from council? Council Thorkelson, then Kenyon.
One is I didn't see a plan for stormwater runoff, and my second question is not so much a question about this proposal, but it's a question: why do some of the lanes? Because in the previous one on Sloan, we are looking after that lane. On this one, we're not looking after it. I was wondering what is the policy difference? Why does the city look after some lanes and not look after other lanes? Do you know?
I will be able to cover off your 2 questions in general terms, and at one point I may be cut off, and if the city manager requests a memo to be sent beyond what I'll be able to answer. The first part of your question was, again?
It just says that the applicant has submitted a plan regarding stormwater.
Correct. In both situations, as a result of the proximity of the proposal to city right-of-way, it is a standard practice for city engineering to ask for stormwater management, and this is simply informally done between the applicant and engineering, and the referral is basically concluded internally by email, and it was just a point of clarification, and as it occurred in the one application, and it was a referral request, it was just included in the report. The second part of the question is about laneway development. Operations staff would be able to certainly fill out the answer to the question a little bit more thoroughly, but developed and undeveloped and developable and undevelopable are considerations that city operations staff deal with in terms of what is developed in terms of the laneway and what isn't, and they would be able to fill in the rest on what the overarching policy and planning is in that regard.
So I don't know if the city manager wants to answer that question or not. I wanted to know how, why is this lane, which looks like a perfectly good lane, an undeveloped lane, and the lane behind Slow a developed lane, one we look after and one we don't look after. That was more my question about why do we look after one and not another, and if somebody's going to, have to look after stormwater on a developed lane, is there a difference between that and an undeveloped lane, or any kind of access issues? I'm just questioning, like I say, it's not really a question about this, but it's a question because we read these two back to back, and one talks about a developed lane, one talks about an undeveloped lane.
I don't believe we have hard and fast policy, but I do believe that operations goes out and looks at it site to site to determine whether or not, as Caroline says, they're either developable or they're not developable. And I think this whole thing is predicated on our ability to budget for the laneways what we do have, and that we can't afford to maintain them now. So the storm drain issue is an issue that I think, again, anecdotally is dealt with based on the kind of collection of water that's going to happen as a result of the development, and making sure that it's going into the storm system if that's available. And we may have recommended no against this application if it caused stormwater problems. So yes, is there an equity problem? Probably. But this, after 100 years, has evolved over time to be fairly pragmatic in terms of what's doable, what's not doable, and that's been left to the judgment of operations. And I could be completely wrong. There could be a whole bunch of policies about lanes, but I don't think so.
Councillor Nish.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in there. I think that like the lane on Sloan is a continuous lane that goes right through, and it was put in there when the development was built. So I think that's why we're stuck with maintaining them. Whereas I think this one here it only services about maybe half a dozen houses, and it's just a dead end. And I think it's kind of been, we're almost there. We'll just push a little further and push a little further, and it's just kind of crept on its own. Whereas the other ones were built when the developments were built. That's what I think, anyways.
Okay, is there other questions about the application?
Yeah, I sort of echo Joy's concerns about water runoff. This house sits quite a bit higher than the houses on 7th, and if you start fooling around with the water coming off a bigger building and running into that lane, it's either going to run down to the road and erode what little bit of the lane there is, or it's going to run into the houses on 7th that are directly behind it. And that partial lane, I used to live at the other end of 7th there by the stairs, and at one time that lane was used. But over a period of time when people don't use it, trees grow up, and that's what happens to lanes in Prince Rupert. But I'm a little concerned about the runoff on this. I'd like to make sure that there is definitely some sort of plan for runoff in this.
The details were shared with city engineering involving a catch basin and considerable effort put in by the applicant. And I would be able to forward the referral response and release, basically, so the satisfaction of engineering would be able to pass that on if that was of interest to council.
Okay, any further comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really didn't have any specific concerns about water. I just wanted to know more about the lanes and how the city what the city looks at differently in the 2 cases between Sloan and between this one, and if there was any difference, and if so, what the policy was. So.
I spoke with operations prior to this presentation, and I was offered that if there were any questions that I would be able to relay that to operations to provide further information if that would suffice.
Okay. So a recommendation that the development variance permit application number DP 1707 for 1408 7th Avenue East proceed to public notification. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have a June 2017 financial variance report from the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Operating and utilities revenues and expenses are on track for this time of year and are within budget, the exception being the roads department, which was affected by the snowfall, which has been previously reported to council. Capital projects are ongoing, and estimates are that projects are on target. And that is our report.
Great. Questions from council? Okay, recommendation that council receives the report for information purposes. Moved by Councillor Nish, seconded by Councillor Randhawa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, any reports from council? Councillor Thurkelson, then Councillor Randhawa, and then Councillor Cunningham.
I know it always bothers people, and it bothers me too, I suppose, when important issues are raised and have to be dealt with right away. But this is an issue that came up in the it was brought to the west coast of British Columbia's attention on the 12th of August that the minister was opening up the Fisheries Act not just for habitat, which we all knew there's hearings across Canada on habitat. Changes the Habitat Act that were made under the Fisheries Act that were made under the Harper government, and the Trudeau government is now looking at changing the environmental parts of both the Fisheries Act, changing the National Energy Board Act, changing, I think, the Transportation Board or the Transportation Act or Navigation Act, and changing also the environmental Canada Environmental Act. So one of the things by opening up the Fisheries Act now is that they have opened it up to all sorts of things, all to deal with fish management, but the biggest one sentence in about 58 slides worth of information was that they were asking for comments on things in the Fisheries Act that are dealing with social and economic and cultural impacts. So, of course, there's many suggestions from Aboriginal communities that are going into the Fisheries Act on social, economic, and cultural, from a social, economic, and cultural perspective. I personally would like to make a motion and ask your indulgence that we would write, because this has to be in by the 28th, all of this information has to be in by August 28th, is that we write a resolution or send a resolution that we adopted last year when the Canadian Fish Cannery closed, but basically asking the government to change the Fisheries Act and put adjacency into the Fisheries Act of British Columbia, so that fish that are caught near a community, or caught in an area, are processed in an area. Again, I just like to remind you there's huge impacts in our community. This year, Canadian Fish ran the cannery, ran the fish plant, and ran it on around 135 people. And those 135 people worked 2 to 3 days a week. If we look at that comparison to 2 years ago, about on the same amount of fish, we are looking at least half the work when we still ran the cannery 2 years ago, because of course we're doing everything the same in the front half of the cannery, it's just the back half of the cannery isn't working. So we had double the number of people working, or triple the number of people working, and certainly double the number of hours that were coming out of that. So I don't know how you want to deal with this, Mr. Mayor, but
due to the time-sensitive matter here, I would entertain this motion. I would say then we pass the motion if council so chooses, and then perhaps, because I believe we've been preparing some reports already about adjacency for the new minister, BC minister here. So perhaps what we could do is send out a letter by email to council for you to look at, and we can make the motion that a letter should be sent with these comments. And then based on the letter on the email, we could edit any last minute things. I just think for time wise, that's probably the fastest way we're going to get this pulled off. Would that be something suitable to you?
Certainly. And I just want to point out the Fisheries Act is one of the oldest acts standing remaining in Canada, and I think it's only been opened 3 times since Confederation to change it. So we really, it's not like an act that is amended constantly. Like this act is up to Harper had not really been changed in my whole career. So, which is a long career now. And what I would like to say is that this is a one chance we're going to have. Now, whether the minister puts anything in there about whether the government agrees to place anything in about adjacency is another matter. But I really do think that it is open. Other communities are asking for adjacency on the East Coast. You know, we're trying to get the Coastal Community Network also to ask about that. It would be very important that Prince Rupert put in a resolution or information or something, a report asking for adjacency and talking about the impacts on our community.
Sure. So how about the resolution simply be to write a letter expressing our interest to comment on the Fisheries Act, mentioning adjacency, which the details we can have in an email, and we can edit the letter that way. Would that be suitable?
Yeah, I think so. I'd so move that we send a letter to the Minister of Fisheries, and that's who that is supposed to be addressed to. So
right.
Send a letter to the Minister of Fisheries expressing the importance of adjacency to our communities, and particularly in our community, but other communities in British Columbia, and asking him to read the information that we're going to be sending along, but asking that adjacency be included in the Fisheries Act.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Sarkelson, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Comments?
My only comment on this is I'd like it strongly worded also the social economic impact that the lack of adjacency has made in this town. It's devastated a whole segment of our population that worked every summer and were independent in that, and now they're not. And I would like to add that social economic impact that the lack of adjacency in our cannery has created.
Any further comments, Councillor Randhawa?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Cunningham. I can see the difference in business compared to a couple of years ago. So I'm full support of this letter.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We'll get staff on that right away. Okay, Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just like to give feedback from people, tourists, and our local people about our gardening members. They're doing a great job, and we are getting lots of good feedback. So I'd like to thank our workers for that. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks. Councillor Cunningham.
Two things then. I'd like to thank the mayor for his work he's doing on the RBA, the Resource Benefit Alliance. A lot of people still don't know what it is, but if we can get this brought forth from the new government, it will make a big difference to the whole Pacific Northwest, as far as we will be getting the money that's been siphoning down to the lower mainland from our resources. We'll be getting some of it back. Right now we're getting pennies on the dollar back. And the mayor has been working on this fairly hard in the last 2-3 months. And it's one of the few times you've seen every community in the Pacific Northwest united with one goal: to get this money back up to the north instead of it being raped and plundered and sent down to the south. But that said, I'm still a little upset about the fact that we have redesigned Prince Rupert, rebuild Prince Rupert, this and that, and yet you walk up 3rd Avenue or down every street in this town and all you see is buildings in disarray, owned by speculators from outside who have, I understand, been sent letters, but I haven't seen one iota of movement on them. I now have been told that the roof is starting to fail on the Dairy Queen. You look at the Totem Theatre, you turn the corner when you come into Vancouver or into Prince Rupert as a tourist, and what do you see? You see a boarded up old Dairy Queen and a theatre that should be torn down. And then you drive around town, you drive into the golf course. People get off the tours from the cruise ships and that. Some of them go golfing. The first thing they see walking into that golf course is a house with 2 old wrecked cars, some parts laying around, and everything else. And I know we have a bylaw officer that's running straight out, and I've said before we need a second one. We don't have the money for that. But I really think we should get some movement on this. If letters aren't going to work, then start fining these people. Last winter, these people never even shoveled their walks, but our businesses up and down 3rd were given letters that if they didn't shovel their walkway when it snowed, they were going to get a fine. These people did nothing. And I think it's time that if they want to come into this community and speculate, that they start paying their way. And I just don't see it happening. And we have bylaws with real teeth in them, and they're not being enforced. It's time we stepped up to the plate and started doing something about it. Take some examples, whatever, but people are, we have to have pride in this community for rebuild and redesign Prince Rupert. Look what the community did with McKay Park. They all, and that can be a model.
That's part of redesign, just
yeah,
throw that out there.
But it's part of redesign. But, what's the use of having this beautiful park and 2 blocks away a house falling over with 3 wrecked cars sitting in front of it? And, I drive down the streets and I see vehicles unlicensed, no license plates on them. We've got to start somewhere, but I think we should start and start doing something about this, because we're going to get another winter if we get a lot of snow. Mr. Long walks on that corner when he goes home for lunch, and he agreed, but I didn't see much snow getting moved. So I say to hell with it. Letters, they've got them, they've done nothing, start finding them. We can use the money.
Well, I think there's a lot of people in the community that feel the way you feel. Councillor Niche brought up the cars last meeting. Staff mentioned that there will be a report coming back to council about a spring cleanup situation that could potentially occur. Just want to give an update then here about what some of the things that are happening around this. So a group of business owners have come together in the community that own different established businesses to discuss the downtown core, discuss businesses, because it's not just up to the city to punish people to fix their buildings. It's a community effort. It's one of those things that, we've decided to start doing the road for 3rd Avenue. We're replacing the sidewalks to get the downtown, our portion of it, up to snuff for the community. And business owners also need to work with us to start their process. So there is a group of business owners that are come together. They're interacting with Councillor Moreau's Small Business Advisory Committee, and they're going through a process right now to essentially retool some of our policies, retool how we interact with the business community. Unfortunately, we're just never going to be able to solve these problems overnight, but there is now some focused attention around the downtown core and some of these buildings. And I've personally met with the owner of the DQ building, who actually would like to see that place developed and wants it to be something that's going to be a cornerstone of this community, and doesn't want it just to be something random that gets down there. And he's thinking long term for this community's benefit too. So, the people are working on this stuff. It's just not happening maybe as quickly as we'd like, but there is a lot of attention being placed on that, and I think we all want to see this town thrive and move forward. And yes, the downtown core certainly needs some improvements, but hey, we've been doing lots of good work on that, and we saved $500,000 doing the road, and those sidewalks are coming along real nice, and over the next 5 years they will be all replaced, and for accessibility and things like that. So I think we have to celebrate the fact that we are making some success, yet have to acknowledge that there are more work to do, and we do need to figure out a strategy around. I know what you're trying to get at is that we need to maybe start putting some pressure on these business owners, and I think we're on the process of going in that direction. So.
Well, it's nice to have a beautiful road to drive on and nice sidewalks to walk on, but when you're driving on that road or walking on the sidewalks, you're looking at a piece of crap beside it. The businessmen and owners that are getting together are the ones that have nice buildings. They're the ones that when you walk up 3rd Avenue, there's a display in their window. They're trying to enhance 3rd Avenue, and they want to put pressure on other people. I'm quite aware of that, but, I think the city, too, has to come up to the plate and say, enough's enough. We've given you enough warnings and things like this. It's now, here's 6 months to do something. Some of these people have owned these buildings for 2 years and done nothing but their talk about it. So I think we should just see some action, and not just on 3rd Avenue, but in the neighborhoods around the town. You drive down streets and you see 3-4 cars parked in a yard. Some of them Skeena taxis. But the bottom line with all that is that these, it's not a wrecking yard in a retail or in a residential area. And I mirror what Councillor Niche is saying. Like, you fix up your house, and 2 doors away is a piece of crap that should be condemned.
I guess, these things take time. There's plans and processes in place. the actions are being taken, and it's going to happen over time, but I'm confident that in the next couple of years we'll be able to really tackle some of these bigger problems. But we can control what we can control as a city right now, and our bylaws do say what they say, and we need to work constructively with these business owners and these building owners too. And we've reached out to every single business owner when we did our design charrette. We met with them. I mean, there is a process in place that people, you know, if you're a building owner, you're not just sitting there wanting to have a derelict building. These people want to get their stuff developed too. It's all about finances, all about time, money, those types of things. So we're working constructively with them. There are some building owners that aren't responding and things like that, and I agree. There should be a process in place for us to start the process of getting them to come forward. But I also believe that working together as a community on this huge issue, which is not just about the city alone, is more of a process we should be doing, and that's what's happening. So just want to put it out there that no one's not doing anything about it.
And it was nice to see the RCMP here tonight. I've been asking for well over 6-7 months for departments, the RCMP, to come before council and do reports. Is this just the tip of the iceberg, or are we going to get more departments
there
coming before?
There will be more reports coming forward.
Okay. The other thing, Japanese knotweed, it's in your backyard too.
Yes.
What happened with it? Because
I got it taken care of. Yeah. We have a process in place. It's on our website, the city's website. We have a Japanese invasive species plan, and homeowners can call the Spectrum people to come and take care of their stuff, and they came and took care of mine in the end. And it's on the homeowner's cost when it's in their property. So, just for clarity's sake on that. Okay, any other further reports?
Yeah, just like answer Mr. Cunningham's one question, like about the used car sitting in some yards. So I talked to a few of my friends, and they already gave the money to junkyard guys to pick up the cars, but they don't have room to pick up. So people are ready to pay the money to pick up the cars, but there's absolutely no room in the junkyards. So city should look for that too.
Yeah, Terrace, I believe, is the only place that will take cars at this point. So that's another issue that we're having in town, because the junkyard's full right now.
Speaking on that, like I had brought up before, the guy from Terrace was willing to come down and pick cars up 10 at a time. I've given this information before, and not much has been done. I mean, there's supposed to be a report coming. I'd like to see it. There's people that are willing to do this work, and we just need to connect with these people that are willing to do it. When I talked to Rupert Towing a few years ago, he is full and he can't take any more, and that's because he's choosing to keep his metal for longer to make it worth more money. So if he can't take care of it, then we have to look outside, and that's where I talked about the crusher. And just to further on Mr. Cunningham's building thing, we have 2 buildings on 2nd Avenue that were both involved in fires quite a while ago now, and there we are looking at plywood. There was a building fire in Terrace, and I was up there a couple weeks ago, and that building's torn down. The property is flattened, it's cleaned up, and it looks good. There's 2 buildings that have been sitting on 2nd Avenue with boarded up, and I would like to know what's going on with them, and where are they at in their insurance process? Are they getting repaired? Are they getting torn down? What is going on with that?
Okay. Anything else? Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Nish, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.